Give me 2 minutes. I am switching to my machine, so I'll be able to switch on my camera.
Hi, I just had a quick question. Will we have to introduce ourselves? Like, how is it going to go? If you could just, or did I miss it? Like, because I joined 2 minutes late.
Namrata will introduce each speaker, and then you can basically submit the recommendations.
Okay, so like we have the 5 minutes to speak in like whatever.
5-7 minutes. Yeah, enough time.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Chirag Kachar. I had subnational climate action work at WRI India. I will be your facilitator for today's session. To begin with, I would like to thank MCGM for bringing all of us together for this very important first ever climate action plan development for the city of Mumbai. I would also like to thank Vatavaran and Climate Voices for their support in this particular process. We have an esteemed panelist today who will talk about some of the recommendations that we should look at as part of the CAP development for the city of Mumbai in the energy as well as the green building sector. Just a few housekeeping announcements. This is a stakeholder process, so we would encourage you to put in your suggestions, all the participants, in the chat box or in the Q&A box. That would be very helpful for us to compiling the CAP actions when we are finalizing the CAP document. Also, there will be links shared in the chat box over the course of the webinar, where as part of the follow-up exercise, you can go to the website and provide your inputs on any particular topics as well. Few notes for our panelist speakers. We are looking at about 5 to 7 minutes of interventions from each and every one of our esteemed panelists. We don't expect any presentations from any of our panelists. I'm told that I have to be a bit of a strict moderator. So we would be tracking time, 5 to 7 minutes for each of your interventions. At the 5-minute interval, I would be switching on my video again. And then at the 7 minutes, I would be interjecting to ensure that we move on to the next panelist as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We'll begin. Our first speaker of the day is Mr. Sunil Dahiya. Sunil is basically an analyst with Center for Research and on Energy and Clean Air. He has an expertise in the fields of research, policy, support, and coalition development on the issues of energy transition, climate change, air pollution, and community rights, among others. Sunil, over to you.
Chirag, I think we need to have Mehul's presentation first.
Oh, yes, thank you so much for reminding that. We'll start with Mehul's presentation. That's a technical presentation that is part of the gap development process. Some of the findings that we are presenting are part of the study that we are conducting right now. So all of these are draft numbers that you'll see. Mehul, over to you. Could I request you to limit your presentation to 7 to 8 minutes? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Chirag. Is it my screen visible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Chirag. Myself, Mehul Patel. I'm working on Mumbai Climate Action Plan with the WRI Climate Program team. I would like to say thanks to MCGM team to give me a chance to present the energy and building sectors and share some of the initial assessment which we was carried out. So this slide saying that this sector accounts for more than 60% of the total GHG emission in Mumbai. Residential building alone account for 32% of the city's total energy demand, followed by the commercial buildings at 23% and industry at 8%. Together, the three subsectors are responsible for 63% of the city's total emission. The four discoms supply electricity to the different parts of the city. This includes BEST and undertaking of the MCGM supplying to the island city area from Kolaba to Sand and Mahim and account for 25% of the total electricity supply. Maharashtra state electricity is supplying in the suburb area of Mulund and Bhandu, almost 5% of the total electricity supply. Adani electricity supply in suburban Mumbai from Bandra to Bhayandar on the western side and Saint to Margon on the eastern side, and accounting for the 46% of the total electricity supply. And Tata Power supplying to the remaining area, including some industrial units and railways, and accounting for 24% of the total electricity supply. The electricity generation mix is currently dominated by the coal, natural gas, and fossil fuel-based thermal power at 95%, which is quite high, and followed by the hydro, wind, and solar power at 5%. In overview of the residential, commercial, and institutional building, the building emission in Mumbai are dominated by the electricity consumption at 75%, followed by the LPG 10%. Thus, the building and household are important urban sites in developing city-level mitigation strategies. Cooking, cooling, and heating water are key activities in the building sector that consume the most amount of energy and leaving a large footprint. Residential and commercial and institutional building emissions are estimated to go up 3.3 times by 2050 in a business as usual scenario. According to the Mumbai solar potential, according to the study conducted in the 2017, the city has a potential of 1724 megawatt of solar energy across the rooftops of residential, commercial, educational, municipal, and industrial buildings, which could help meet the half of the total city energy demand. Rooftop solar installation in residential building almost cater of the 1300 megawatt, followed by the industrial building 223 megawatt, and educational building at 7100 megawatt. Andheri waste area, that the K waste ward and Borivali R Central ward have the highest solar potential in the Mumbai city. In heat island effect in buildings with a large glass and concrete facades with no trees and adequate setbacks reflect excess heat on street, resulting in heat island effect. Certain areas are much warmer than others with a better green cover and lesser reflective surfaces. Poor choice of building material, increase indoor temperature and building energy demand, and increase heat risk on the public streets. Figure 1 shows an increase in land surface temperature over a decade before and after the Metro Line 1 was built, resulting in increased temperature along with the corridor due to the densification. In ongoing initiatives, some initiatives undertaken in this sector include the Green Power Tariff. The Maharashtra State Electricity Regular Commission in 2021 allowed a green power tariff of rupees 0.66 kWh to be levied on consumer opting for 100% clean energy. Accordingly, the DISCOMs owned by the Adani and Tata Power are both offering their consumers, including corporates, industrial, commercial, hotels, restaurants, and industrial consumers, the option of green power tariff in Mumbai. The cost of the procurement of RE is only borne by the specific consumers who opt for the RE option. Consumers have the flexibility to decide the percentage of RE in their total energy consumption and can opt for the 100% RE too. Maharashtra has a state energy conservation policy. The policy was envisioned to help in saving 6,000 crore rupees and 1,000 megawatt electricity. In Energy Club will be taken under the secondary schools establishment and strengthening the Energy Club for schools has been included as one of the activities. The activities would not only make aware the children about the need of conserving energy, but at the same time would educate and involve their parents as well in this above cause. The identify activities are one of the measures which can help creating awareness in the domestic sectors. The conservation of the conventional HPSV street light by LED street lights result on saving minimum 40% of the energy consumption. Till March 2020, more than 39,000 street lights have been converted into LED lights. Subsidy on rooftop solar. Under the scheme, central finance assistance will be provided by the center for installation of rooftop solar system at least 1 kilowatt capacity to residential category consumers. 40% subsidy for 1 to 3 kilowatt and 20% subsidy for 3 to 10 kilowatt. Consumers of housing groups and RWS will also get the 20% subsidy for common facility up to 500 kilowatt with a limit of the 10 kilowatt per house. Key gaps and challenges. The city grid is heavily dependent, as I said earlier, on fossil fuel-based thermal power. The city has been unable to reach its 1,700 megawatt solar potential through decentralized installation. There is no city-level energy efficiency cell. The city also does not have the green building cell. There are no official guidelines for adopt passive buildings design strategy towards improving ventilation or addressing heat island effect. And there are no strategies to improve thermal comfort for low-income housing. The decarbonizing Mumbai grid and building energy resilience infrastructure, we are considering a four-pronged approach increase to the proportion of the renewable energy in Mumbai's energy mix, which looks at supply side strategies. In the improving energy efficiency in new and existing infrastructure, which address energy conservation from the demand side, promoting green building through certification and ECBC compliance, and finally integrating passive design strategy to ensure the thermal comfort, especially in low-income housing. Potential strategies include the grid decarbonizing and installation of rooftop solar to increase the proportion of the renewable energy in Mumbai energy mix. Improving energy efficiency in new and existing infrastructure, 100% transition to the energy efficient street light, public and traffic lighting system. Retrofitting and transition to high electric stoves and water heaters. Promoting green buildings by strengthening ECBC compliance, promoting certification by the established rating agencies, undertake a demonstration of zero carbon municipal building projects and value chain approach to decarbonize building and construction. And finally, integrating passive design strategies to ensure the thermal comfort through the ventilation, cool roof and green walls, etc. And also alternative building materials and building form the density and its density. Thank you. This is no means an exhaustive list. We will hear from our panelists now. Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you so much, Mehul, for outlining the current status of the energy sector within the city of Mumbai. That includes both electrical energy as well as the sources of non-electricity as well. We would now go to our panelists. The first panelist is Sunil Dahiya. Sunil, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mehul, for enlightening presentation and putting out facts, particularly on the energy sector. And it is very evident from your presentation that even when we talk of the building and energy sector, particularly in Mumbai, electricity generation or electricity consumption in the city is one of the leading factors leading to high GHG emissions, amounting to total about 70 to 71%. And therein, you also showed that out of about 3,300 to 3,700 megawatt, which was the peak demand last year, Mumbai itself holds a potential of generating about 1,700 megawatt of electricity through renewable energy sources. That's huge. If a city itself can generate 50% of its peak demand, that's a huge thing for a city like Mumbai. Now, when we look at the presentation which you gave and the ongoing discussion, which has also highlighted Mumbai on the global landscape as one of the most polluted mega cities, along with Delhi, when the global rankings of cities with air pollution have been done. So Mumbai is also among the one of the most polluted cities, and we know that the reason for air pollution in Mumbai as well as anywhere is fossil fuel burning. And it is very evident from your presentation that the GHG emissions for Mumbai also comes from the electric sector, which is heavily dependent on burning of coal, amounting to about 95% of electricity for Mumbai still coming from coal. So there is a very, very close relationship between the air pollution and climate change, not just for Mumbai, but for any geography across the globe. Now, we know that there is this ongoing work going on preparing the climate action plan for Mumbai. There are similarly various other programs which are underway. One of them is building a source apportionment inventory for the air pollution under the National Clean Air Program for cities across India. And then along with that, there is a carrying capacity assessment study, which is ongoing again for Mumbai as well as many other cities under the National Clean Air Program. So there are huge synergies, and that's why even when we look at the global conversations on air pollution and climate change, they go hand in hand. And that's why it is very, very important, not just from this global threat of climate change perspective to reduce our resilience on the fossil fuel, but also from the very near-term and very immediate impacts to our local communities, which are being impacted due to air pollution. Now, obviously, there will be other panelists who will be focusing more deeply on the energy efficiency measures within the buildings, as well as alternatives to reduce the energy demand for the buildings. But what I would like to focus on is the entire concept of how do we replace this fossil fuel being burned, maybe not in Mumbai, but somewhere else, which is leading to the intrinsic greenhouse gas embodiment of the entire city and the geography. Therein, as we mentioned, there is huge potential which has not been utilized in Mumbai for the global energy development, and that potential will not just reduce 1,700 megawatt of electricity dependence on the central grid, which is highly polluting or dependent on coal, but this also will reduce the transmission losses. Right now, Mumbai has about 14% of transmission losses when Mumbai procures this electricity. And we all know that Mumbai just has this one big power plant in Bombay, but most of its electricity still comes from outside the city limits. And that's wherein there are huge transmission losses. So the actual saving, if you replace the 1700 megawatt electricity by the electricity generated within Mumbai, would be much more than 1700 and would be around 2000 megawatt. Secondly, what also happens is right now, Maharashtra particularly is a state where all the coal-based power plants, the installed coal-based power plants, have been utilized at very suboptimal levels. And to the extent that over the current financial year, which is from April to August, only 46 to 47% of the capacity of the existing coal-based power plants has been utilized. That technically means that most of these central sector, private sector, as well as state sector power plants, with which Maharashtra State Electricity Board or other DISCOM utilities have signed long-term power purchase agreements. And though most of those power purchase agreements are signed at 85% normative power load factor operations, ensuring that the DISCOMs will be purchasing that quantum of electricity, and if they don't do so, they will still need to pay for that excess amount of electricity, as well as they pay for the amount of electricity they use for, which will amount to that cost plus an added cost. Now, Mehul also mentioned about this levy of 0.66 rupees per kilowatt or per unit of fee if somebody wants to shift to renewable energy. But over the time, when this entire mechanism and regime of people shifting to renewable energy changes, and if there are these realignments of where the energy or electricity is coming from for the state, and the excess power purchase agreements has been done away with, the excess old coal-based power capacity has been shut down, it will not just reduce the GHG embodiment of the consumers or for Mumbai as a city, but it will also result into saving in terms of economic gains, because now the DISCOMs will be spending very less amount of financial resources to procure the electricity which is required, because they would not be paying for the excess capacity which they are not driving from. So technically, improving the efficiency of working of power plants will result into huge GHG savings, because that electricity will come from renewable energy plus economic savings. Now, apart from that, when I can you guys hear me better? Because there is a comment that my voice is not clear.
Yes, Sunil, please continue. I think you'll have to wrap up in next one or 2 minutes.
Yeah. So the other aspect which I would want to touch upon is again, because I mentioned that air pollution and climate change are very closely related. So there is this another aspect of the energy sector, which is one of the major contributors of GHG emissions in Mumbai. That most of these power plants, we know that TATA in Mumbai, because of being in Mumbai, because of using imported fuel, maybe has installed pollution control devices such as flue gas desulfurization and others. But majority of the power plants, apart from Tombay and Toyota by Adani, all other power plants in Maharashtra have not installed any flue gas desulfurization technology which they were supposed to do. First, way back in 2017, then they were given new timelines. And till now, apart from these power plants, none of the power plants have even moved ahead in terms of awarding the tender, except a few entities power plants. So there is a very, very close relationship between the global threat of climate change and the local threat of air pollution, heat island effect, and all that has to be taken into account.
Could I request you to wrap up in next 15-20 seconds? Thank you.
So there is a need to see climate change policies and air pollution policies together. There is a need to reduce our dependence on the fossil fuel energy, and there is a need to shift our dependence from the central grid to the decentralized renewable generation within the city, while cleaning the old operational coal-based power plants and shutting them down. That's what I would like to say, and that should be incorporated somewhere in the upstream of even construction material value chain in the urban landscapes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunil, for outlining 3 or 4 key recommendations: minimizing T&D losses, improving the efficiency of the power plants, and also the role that the state level agencies can play in helping Mumbai clean up its grid or move towards a transition to the renewable energy. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Ashish Fernandes, who is CEO and lead analyst for Climate Risk Horizons. He would be talking about identifying and analyzing the impact on investment value that climate crisis is already exerting and how this is likely to play out over the long-term horizons. Ashish, over to you. I'd appreciate if you can wrap up in 7 minutes.
Thanks, Chirag, and thanks WRI, Vatavaran, and Municipal Corporation for hosting this very important discussion. So I'd just like to make a few points. One is everyone is aware of what the issue is with climate change, and the fact that cities are one of the major contributors in terms of resource consumption, primarily electricity consumption, and therefore what the fossil fuel impact of that is. It's really great to be part of this discussion because Bombay has always been a leader in such matters. And I think Mumbai has a role to play in India in terms of setting the trend, in terms of what cities can do to mitigate these issues. So I think that's the framing that we must look at it in. I think it's also important that we must look at framing this in win-win terms, because this is not, what we're doing is not only going to be good for the environment, but actually, thanks to technology at the moment, it will actually help in reducing costs, improving quality of life for the vast majority of citizens. So I think framing it in that sense is really important. With Bombay being the economic powerhouse of the country, we have virtually the who's who of all the major corporations resident in Bombay. I think that role both has opportunities for us, provides opportunities for us in terms of what to do, and helps to set the example for what the rest of India should do. So just coming to very specific interventions that I think we should be doing. The cities traditionally suck resources from the hinterland, and Bombay is no exception, whether it's natural resources or it's people resources, but this needs to be countered. And one of the best ways of countering it is decentralized renewable energy that Sunil talked about, maximizing the potential. Now, this study that talks about almost 2,000 megawatts, this is now several years old. Hardly anything of that has been actually realized. So what is the reason that we are not actually being able to tap into DRE, into rooftop solar and renewable energy generation within the city itself? I think that really needs to be looked at. What is the role that both government has to play as well as private corporations have to play there? I think one of the best ways to actually get that ball moving is for the state government and the municipal corporations to look at their own building and land stock and see to what extent, how much they can maximize rooftop generation. So a project that looks at that, all municipal school buildings, all municipal hospitals, parking lots, etc. What is the rooftop solar generation potential there? Similarly, on reduced consumption and efficiency, cooling load is one of the most inefficient uses of electricity in Bombay right now. And we've all seen it in most offices, not just government offices, but even private offices where, yeah, okay, the AC is running, but the doors are not closed or the windows slightly ajar, and it's just a waste. So what is the specific reduced consumption through efficiency and better cooling? Both in terms of the appliances as well as in terms of insulation and gap sealing and simple things like that. I think the presentation already touched upon lighting. And once again, I'd like to stress that if you look at government and city administration resources first, and what is the maximization of potential there, that sets a nice example for what private citizens should be doing and what the corporate sector should be doing. Another thing that hasn't been touched upon that I would really like to see Bombay explore is looking at the solar potential. We have a large number, a decent number of water bodies and large lakes in the environs of Mumbai. What is the floating solar potential in those bodies? We know that floating solar has, again, win-win benefits, not just from generation, but also from reduced loss of water through evaporation. Water is a crucial issue in Bombay, so maybe there's something there that we can look at specifically. Lastly, I think with the state government and the municipal corporation being such large consumers of electricity, they have basically the purchasing power in terms of demanding open access for renewable purchases. So basically, what this is using the open access regime on the electricity grid to demand that 100% or maybe starting with 50% and then moving to 100% of their purchases come from RE through open access. That means through a dedicated RE provider. I know the MERC has tried to has suggested a levy of this additional 66 paise per unit of electricity. But I think it's important to keep in mind that renewable energy now is the cheapest new source of electricity. So there is not really, there should not be a financial burden on someone who wants to switch to renewables. The reason that burden comes is because of red tape and permitting issues. And then there's a role for all government institutions to reduce that red tape, reduce those hidden costs, so the consumer benefits from the fact that the technology is now cheaper than fossil fuel technology. Again, what is the role that the government and government institutions, and when I say government, I mean also the municipal corporation, can play in actually spurring innovation in that sector to actually get DRE uptake across the city, maximize its potential. I think that is, those are the main key points that I wanted to touch on. I don't think there's anything other than, I think the passive roofs was already talked about. So I think there's huge potential there. And again, I think one of the failings that people like myself and many of the people on the panel, I would imagine, also go through is that we often tend to think from our own perspective in terms of our class perspective. But I think it's also really important. That's why I was really thrilled to see that in the presentation, looking at what are the solutions in the low income housing. Obviously ACs are not prevalent there, but there are other heating needs, heating and cooling solutions there that are applicable. So what are those solutions? There's no easy answer, but I think there's a lot of research and technology being devoted to that. So I think maximizing in that, maybe some innovative open source kind of competitions for cooling solutions that are targeted at the lower income levels of society, without that are cool, that are green and do not increase the electricity burden a lot. I think those are some innovative options that we should be exploring.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashish, for being very efficient in terms of utilizing your time. Very important points that you've identified, that not only the government entities have a role to play, but also people's participation is equally important in transitioning to a low carbon economy for future, and also building the resilience. And also, thank you so much for highlighting the need of innovative business model that needs to come up in order to enable this kind of transitions. I would encourage our participants to, whenever you are hearing some of the thoughts from our expert speakers, and if you have any suggestions or solutions or any thoughts that you have on some of these topics, please feel free to type them in. You can also visit the MCGM website and provide your detailed input separately on the website as well. Next, I would go over to Dr. Neelesh, who is Chief Distribution at Tata Power. He has more than 25 years of experience in electricity operations and technology, ranging from conventional to non-conventional sources of energy, battery energy storage systems, reactive power management, etc. We look forward to your inputs, Dr. Kane, specifically on how do we decarbonize the Mumbai's grid, which is heavily dominant by the fossil fuels.
So thank you, Chirag, and thank you, WRI, for inviting me for this discussion. Today I will speak, on behalf of our distribution. It's a very good idea to decarbonize the Mumbai. And, the good news is that the people or the customers in Mumbai are, very responsive towards every initiative taken. I am talking about the green, the tariff. The customers in Mumbai has, overwhelmingly supported this idea. And, let me tell you, in Tata Power, more than 1,000 customers, including big banks, big commercial customers, big industrial customers, have come forward to be part of, the green consumers. As, Ashish rightly said, that the open access, many of our, the commercial and industrial customers are, coming forward, and they are taking power in open access through the renewable power generation outside Mumbai. So this is coming in a great way. And, the customers in Mumbai are taking their efforts, to take forward the decarbonizing and taking and trying to use the green power. So that is one. So far as the Mumbai is concerned and Tata Power is concerned, right now, renewable mix is around 13%, and we have a plan to increase up to 25%, and that is going in a big way. Rooftop solar, initially the response was very less. Reason behind, the space constraint is a major problem in Mumbai, but now the response is very good, and we could, achieve around 12 megawatt of the rooftop solar, and we're likely to meet around 50 megawatt because from the MNRE, a lot of, the grant is also given for the rooftop solar, and that is also going in a good way. Demand side management is one area, by which, we can manage the energy conservation and, can do the decarbonizing. And let me tell you, the results are very encouraging. We are going ahead with, the 5-star air conditioners, LEDs, BLDC fans, in which 1/3 of energy conservation we could do. Solar pumps, we are coming in a big way. And more importantly, the major conservation is being done by the industrial customers. So energy efficient motors, we are pushing in, in a big way. Heat pump, the major hotels and hospitals, the heating consumption is very high. So we are coming up with the heat pump as a demand side management initiative, in which you can, water heating can be done hardly in 20% of energy conservation. So heat pump and all these initiatives we have taken. Third important thing is that to optimize the energy conservation, especially of the big customers, energy audit is one very important thing, and we have extended free of cost energy auditing for our customers, and we have conducted more than 250 energy audits. And in energy audits, we have given a very good recommendation to all customers how they can go for the energy efficient devices and become the energy efficient. So these are the few initiatives we have taken. More importantly, smart meter rollout, which is not a direct technology for the energy conservation or the decarbonization, but the smart meter we have rolled out, and by smart meter we could, see, every hour, every day energy consumption of the consumers, and we have an app what we call KYC, know your energy consumption, and by which we are giving every information to the customer that his energy consumption is more, and then he can go for some demand side management program or some energy efficient programs or so. Solar public charging, we have around 400 EV charging stations, and we are pushing now the solar charging station along with Tata Motors. A lot of electric vehicles are coming in big way. So for every big society now, a lot of demand is coming for, the solar public charging stations. So this is also, we are coming up with big way. And the last point, I would like to make that we are also in favor of ECBC, especially for the customer of 100 kilowatt and above. ECBC, certification, if it is made, from the MEDA, compulsory for giving their connection, a lot of, encouragement will be there, and a lot of discipline will also be there for doing the energy conservation. So by doing best of the energy mix, by increasing the renewables, doing demand side management, and, having ECBC sort of initiatives from the government, people, public and the government, so as a very good public-private partnership, the things can be taken in, the positive conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kane. 3-point strategy that you've spoken about, managing the demand, infusing more renewable energy, and also people's participation, something that Mehul has also presented. And good to see, or good to know that, you're planning for 25% of renewable energy within your energy mix as well. That will be supplied to the city of Mumbai. We would be encouraged to see other distribution companies also, match up, or if you have any additional information on that, if you can share that as well, that would be very good. As a next step, moving on, I would like to invite Namrata Kapoor, who is a researcher and a senior consultant with IIHS, who is working on issues of affordable housing, and she will be talking about the building codes for thermal comfort in low-income housing projects. Thank you so much, Namrata. Over to you.
Hi, thanks a lot for inviting me. You just said, like most of my work is in housing. And so I am going to speak about building codes in the housing sector and energy efficiency in the housing sector. So I just want to set the context over here before we begin, okay? According to a Technical Group 12 report that came out in 2012, there is a shortage of 18.78 million homes in the urban areas, okay? And 95% of this demand comes from the LIG and the EWS segment of our society. Now, this LIG and EWS segment is not the ones which are defined in PMAY. According to the report, what they have taken the LIG to be, it is people who are earning between 5,000 rupees to 10,000 rupees a month, and EWS is earning less than 5,000 rupees a month. Okay, so this is not the PMAY LIG, which says that, you know, people who are earning about 50,000 rupees a month are low income groups. This is a really, I mean, and so 90% of your demand is coming from people who are earning less than 10,000 rupees a month, as per this 2012 report. I do not think post the COVID crisis anything has, you know, improved. These could still be the numbers very well. When I say something of this sort, you know, on one hand, you like immediately think of it as an opportunity, right? Like you think like, oh, 18.78 million homes are yet to be built. Now these homes will last like 40, 60 years. And if we take the right kind of, you know, measures right now, we can go ahead and ensure that these are built adequately for the future. So you see an opportunity immediately, but you also see that there is like, if people are earning just about 10,000 rupees a month, you know, is the market going to be able to service this segment? This is an important question to ask, you know. So because according to this, if I do the affordability calculation on this, LIG segment will earn about, can afford a house of rupees 5 lakh. And the market is right now servicing like the 45 lakh. That's a priority sector, you know, that is the low affordable income when it is spoken about in the newspapers. But here you're talking about 95% of the demand coming from people who can afford homes which are 5 lakh, right? Like, so there is a big problem over here. And so we understand that the market is not going to be the ones who are going to, like, you know, service all of this demand. Some of it is going to be through, you know, other means, like it's going to be through slum upgradation, it's going to be through redevelopment, it's going to be through self-build, and, you know, making sure that incrementally these homes become better in the future. So that is one thing I wanted to say. The second thing I want to say is that we have to remember that when you talk about homes which are belonging to the low income groups, these are not homes where only domestic activities are carried out. These are homes where a lot of sort of, home-based industry is carried out. You know, we've just started, like the service sector has just started to work from home, but like, you know, low-income groups have, like, you know, small-scale industries running from their homes since a very long time. So whether it is like providing for a dabba service, whether it is doing, you know, embroidery, or, you know, any kind of handloom work, or all of these activities have been carried out from the home traditionally. So when we design homes, we have to ensure that they're built for light ventilation and thermal comfort. Because if we don't, then you are sort of affecting the productivity of the people, and this has a direct effect on their income. Yeah, it has a direct effect on the education of their kids. It has a direct effect on women who still disproportionately spend a lot more time at home. Hence, we got to make sure that we build EWS and LIG homes, or upgrade homes to, upgrade the EWS and LIG homes to withstand the onslaught of bad climate in the future, and are productive and are healthy. Now, an example of this kind of home is the SRA home, right? Like the slum rehabilitation home, the rehabilitation colonies that we see in the M East Ward. And if you start looking at the typology of these homes, if you start looking at the regulations with which these homes have been built, you realize that the regulations have actually done the exact opposite. Instead of making them healthy, instead of making them efficient, thermally efficient from the point of view of light and ventilation, we have relaxed the regulations to such an extent that the homes do not have light and ventilation on the ground floor, right? What are the regulations? According to the 1991 regulations, the distance between two buildings only had to be 3 meters. And this is distance between two buildings which are 24 meters tall, that's G+7 tall. Now we have updated it to say that these have to be 6 meters. This 3 meters has been made to 6 meters, but the height has also been increased to 36 meters. If I'm correct, it's 36 meters. So what is happening is that basically that, and I just want to tell you as a comparison, if I had to build for the general building regulations, not the redevelopment regulations for slums, but in general building regulations, in 1991, for two buildings that are 24 meters tall, G+7 tall, I would have to leave a distance of 16 meters. 3 meters kaha, 16 meters kaha. So you understand that a building which has a distance between two of them, which is 16 meters, is obviously going to have better light and ventilation on the lower, floors, as compared to a building that has, just 3 meters distance. So if you look at, there are lots of images of Natwar Park compound, Lalubhai compound that are floating around. You will see that there is just no light coming to the ground floor. And what people are doing is leaving their lights and fans on for the whole day. This has a burden on their income. But that's not it. I mean, this build form is so unhealthy that a recent report from Doctors for You has showed that there is a strength of association between the burden of tuberculosis in these colonies and that has a direct correlation to the build form. In other words, the relaxation that you have done of distance between the buildings has led to the such bad conditions that there are diseases spreading here. And anecdotally, people will tell you kids have, specs, their eyesight is poor, people have depression, and all of this is coming from bad build form in some ways. Yeah. So what are we supposed to be doing now? Now, I've said, whenever I say some, attack this kind of distance between the building thing, people say that if you have to make redevelopment viable, you have to, reduce the distance between the buildings to this extent. And the thing is that there is no don't do a knee-jerk reaction and just because you have to make a building viable, you bring the distance between buildings down. Don't have that kind of.
Sorry, could I request you to wrap up in next 30 seconds?
Yes, I will. So what the suggestion is that basically what you need to do is go ahead and carry out, studies. There are lots of institutions that will help you model buildings, tell you what are the good typologies that allow for a good lux to come into your homes on the ground floor. That is one thing. The second thing you want to make sure is that you think about buildings. Your codes insist that the buildings are sort of green right at the get-go. And it's true that a lot of things can only be done when the buildings are built. But also think of this as retrofitting, right? So in the sense, can you encourage cooperative housing societies to, save up money so that they can keep continuously retrofitting buildings to become green in the future? Don't think of it as a one-time thing, because one-time costs, people can't bear that cost in the beginning, right? The next thing you want to think about is also that how do you think about the
Namrata, I'm sorry, I have to.
Yeah, that's the. That was my last point. How do you think about energy efficiency in slums? And studies would have to be carried out for that. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Namrata. I'm sorry, we have to.
No, that's fine.
I would also encourage you to look at the Q&A box. There are a few questions around LIG and EWS, probably in the slum areas. If you want to take a crack at some of those things. Dr. Kane, there's a specific question on demand side management and the policy to incentivize energy efficient appliances to the consumers. If you would like to take a shot at that one as well. Moving on, my next speaker, I would like to call upon Dr. Sunita Purushottam, who is Head Sustainability at Mahindra Lifespace Developers Limited. She would be talking about the green buildings, demand side gaps and challenges, what kind of regulatory changes would help catalyze the action in this sector, and what kind of approach should be adopted in this particular sector. Sunita, over to you.
Thank you. I'm audible, right? Chirag? Yeah. So yes. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for the consultation and the efforts being taken to hear.
If you could put on your video as well. Sorry.
Yes.
If you could put on your video as well.
Sure, I had my video on earlier. Cool. Yeah. All right. So basically, coming from the building aspects, and I echo what my earlier speaker mentioned, and Mehul also mentioned that, you know, some of these strategies would be around looking at how do we make you know, adherence to the green building codes, and you know, improved enhanced energy efficiency. The thermal discomfort aspect, which we don't really understand very well, is actually the heat gain from conduction and radiation because of the concrete wall and the technology that is being used as compared to earlier masonry structures. The monolithic concrete constructions that have now become a norm, it is an innovative technology. It allows us to build a good quality housing projects in a very cost-effective and a faster way. It does really, you know, result in box-type structures, and it has better resistance to earthquake and strong winds compared to conventional construction type. And therefore, BMTPC and CPWD have actually listed down as one of the innovative technologies, aluminum formwork and stay-in-place formwork. These are some of the emerging technologies that we are seeing. However, the walling material and the thermal conductivity, the U value of these are over 2.5 watts per meter square Kelvin, and therefore they are much warmer. And in terms of the adaptive comfort, there will be a number of hours during the year that the residents will be in thermal discomfort, as a result of which they will be using resorting to cooling, external cooling and fan-based cooling, plus additional cooling required from ACs. So what we are going to see going forward is a huge amount of discomfort, which will have an impact on human health, increased indoor temperature, lesser productivity, and this is across all segments of homes. However, this will lead to two sort of differentiation. One is that from the poorer segment and the affordable housing segment, fan-ons all the time, but with residents who are in the premium mid segment will resort to buying ACs, and therefore this is counterintuitive to the climate action, right? So understanding that temperature is on the rise and the thermal comfort needs to be prioritized, running of cooling equipment, various types of low carbon cooling technologies need to come in, but I wouldn't put a lot of emphasis on low carbon cooling technologies, but rather put the emphasis on how the building is designed and how the uncomfortable hours can be reduced. And a variety of studies have shown that these kind of construction technology result in huge number of uncomfortable hours throughout the year. What also needs to be done is that for the ECBC for commercial, but Ecosensitive Samhita for the building residential sector has to be notified and has to come in, where the building sanction is linked to the compliance to Ecosensitive Samhita residential code. And this is according to various climates, and for the warm and humid climate, meet the RETV value that has been defined. So the residential envelope transmittance value defines the thermal performance of the building envelope, okay, for a particular climate. So we will have to see how we meet it for Mumbai. And there are a large number of dimensions that RETV depends on, and wall and roof value is one of them. The other aspect of concern is the massive use of glass in commercial buildings as well as residential buildings. That needs to be defined. And if we are not able to define that, the cooling energy demand will go very high, and it is counterintuitive to a climate action, right? So with monolithic concrete and excess glass comes high performance glass, right? And then we are also looking at how design is now moving to buildings without any chhajjas, that is the vertical and the horizontal fenestrations. So proper planning for heat insulation, air ventilation in housing units, and optimization and the correct orientation, the shading, the build form needs to be done for all different kinds of building technologies. And the passive techniques deployment through to be ensured through the notification of ECBC-R for all the residential code. So primarily this works on the energy demand reduction and to look at how the U value of the construction technologies can be with the help of insulation. For example, EPS in monolithic construction can provide 100% thermal insulation and zero thermal leaks. The other thing that we need to look at is, can we promote climate action through incentives, through the reduction in for homeowners who want to buy green buildings through reduced stamp duty and registration, and that would be a great movement for moving towards green homes. The other aspect that, so I've spoken about the thermal comfort, the type of walling materials and the glass. The other thing is that in terms of climate actions, to relook at how parking is defined and what can be done to promote walkability. Parking as a mandate first comes into the design, and it allows no space for designing walkable spaces which are more healthier spaces. Also look at access to public transportation. Mumbai is very, very well connected. There needs to be something to be done to de-incentivize car ownership in Mumbai in a real, honest sense, so that we don't have spaces just carved out just to park our cars, and there is an increased car ownership in Mumbai.
Sarah, can you wrap up in the next 30 seconds?
I am almost done. So the key points that I've mentioned is around the passive design, the notification of ECBC-R, linking it to the sanction of the buildings. We also have to look at the parking related aspects and de-incentivizing car ownership and how buildings are designed for walkability, limiting the use of glass. Again, it will come into the building envelope, and the thermal performance of building envelope for all new residential buildings linked to the. And the fourth, but not the least, look at how consumers can be incentivized for opting for high performance homes.
Thank you so much for Sunita for highlighting a value chain relevant approach for the building and construction sector in Mumbai. I would now move on to our final speaker, Namrata Ginoya, who is manager with Resilience and Energy Access Program within WRI India. Namrata, over to you. Please do share your thoughts about how can we ensure energy access against the uncertain and extreme climate risk. What actions need to be in place in the Mumbai Climate Action Plan to ensure energy resilience? Thank you.
Thank you, Chirag. There are mainly two aspects of energy resilience that Mumbai must consider. The first one is access to energy. Access to energy is an important indicator to build adaptive capacity. With increasing number of summer days and heat waves, the city and its people will require and consume more electricity for cooling every year. So, the previous panelists, what they mentioned, all of these things need to be considered: retrofitting buildings, green spaces, all of these things. Access to basic services in general helps build adaptive capacity, and access to energy can help you access those other services, such as water, improve health services, etc. The second is the resilience of the infrastructure itself. With changing weather patterns and increasingly frequent intense extreme events, such as floods, cyclones, even heat waves, the city needs to build climate resilience generation, transmission, and distribution infrastructure. Also, as sea levels rise, the combined impact of the rise and the storm surges will be very destructive for all infrastructure, not just energy. The city basically needs a detailed assessment plan to be conducted for its power sector. The sector needs to have climate plans which help respond to long-term climate scenarios and also respond to near-term weather events that are a result of climate change. So it is important for the sector to understand what risk each location and each system will face. Notably, climate risks will vary at local level and during the lifetime of the asset. So both of these things need to be considered. There are two types of planning that should be considered. Crisis planning, which focuses on daily operations, including maintenance and operating parameters, things that limit damage and helps in operations management. It covers, advanced preparations, rehearsal of emergency plans, all of these things which are currently undertaken under disaster management plans. There's an additional element that needs to be considered, which is the long-term planning, which can identify changing system requirements for potential impacts. It can also include risk and cost assessments to help the city prioritize action. This action can include decisions about remaining lifetime of existing assets, whether retrofitting or refurbishment is necessary, about new or additional specifications or new locations that need to be considered. For climate pattern, future climate patterns are especially helpful for planning generation infrastructure. Availability of water, air temperature, rainfall patterns, everything will affect your hydropower generation, obviously, but will also affect thermal power production due to cooling needs. A lot of coastal sites are considered for generation mainly because of seawater availability. But any of such development design needs to consider raising the level of structures, include flood defenses, improving drainage and protection for fuel storage. As we move to renewable power generation, some of the similar risks will exist for them as well, but there will be additional risks such as cloud cover, high temperatures affecting productivity of solar cells as well. So climate simulations can help the generation facilities understand the impact of climate change on productivity and help them plan in future. For transmission and distribution, heavy rains, flooding, all of this can lead to submersions and corrosions. Foundation designs need to be changed based on what will be the waterlogging potential in future. During extreme heat conditions, fires are a risk. So the designs of the tower, the insulation needs to be looked at. Overall, all of this entire infrastructure is vulnerable to intense storm conditions. So you have to look at how you relook at the design part of it. The sector, nevertheless, will face some issues. So they need to plan for supply interruptions as well. Ability to mobilize large number of generators, backup generators for peak load will be important. The transmission and distribution systems need to be sectionalized or isolated for shutdowns. At customer level also, backup systems or building level decentralized storage to support emergency needs, to support peak loads should be considered. And one of the most important aspect of planning will be to understand how climate change will affect the surrounding regions, because transport of coal can be affected. The overall impact on the larger watershed can affect your availability of water. Accessing locations for repair may be affected. The road access is very important for repair. So, supporting infrastructure needs to be resilient as well. During Cyclone Takte, power was restored in many areas only after a week. So that was mostly because of other infrastructure being affected as well. So the first line of defense consists of low cost, no regret measures, such as vegetation management, waterproofing, roads, servicing and maintenance, which is something that the city needs to start looking at very quickly. Overall, I'll give two recommendations, one for the industry, which needs to conduct cost benefit analysis based on climate projections, invest very heavily in R&D to upgrade major infrastructure elements, and continue, exchange best practice and share resources with other industry partners. And for policymakers, they need to support a business model that is viable in the context of climate change, include incentives for utilities to invest in adaptation, and overall in terms of regulation, adjust them and the system specifications and equipment standards for climate impacts. So if that is run, then the other side of it is the building and working with the demand aspect of it, which other panelists looked at. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Namrata, and thank you for pointing out that we don't need the long-term analysis only at the city level, but we also need to look at sectoral level as well. A very important aspect, something which is already been carried out as part of the Mumbai CAP development. Thank you so much. I would like to thank all our panelists for giving their expert insights. Now, I would like to call upon Shri Narendra Pagare, who is Officer on Special Duty Ecosensitive Zone, Sanjay Gandhi National Park, to conclude the webinar today.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Narendra Pagare, and last 1 hour, we are listening very good opinions of the panel members, namely Mehul, Patel, and I would like to say something about it. As regards to the Mumbai city, if you are talking about, we have a land city. We are having only 437 square kilometer area surrounded by the treeside water, and importantly that it is to be noted that 54% are slum area, and that 54% slum area existed on the 7% of land. So just think about how that energy will be provided. So now we are discussing all this energy sector and green building concept. So recently corporation had published development control regulations. It is a promotions also, and there we have made very good provisions regarding all these, considering the climate changes, considering the energy utilization. There are very good provisions. As green buildings, there is a regulation 17. It is clearly mentioned that how that credit can be obtained from the various authorities. And how all, so one of the panel members said regarding the distances between the buildings. So, and it is a correct, that is, sorry, it is a different planning authority, and but now that suggestion is already considered. Health hazards. So it
seems like there's some bandwidth issue with Mr. Pagare. Labaina, if you're there with him.
Sorry for disconnection. So, and second thing that there are other members also, they have opine on the planning. So we have, corporation had the planning, short term, long term, micro. So we are working on it. And definitely, even in future also, we will definitely consider all of your views, and the care will be taken and incorporating the DCR. Thank you for having such a good session. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pagare, for highlighting what are the actions that the city is already taking, and also considering the inputs that we received through this session. Thank you so much. With this, we would like to conclude the webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. And thank you to our panelists, speakers, for providing their inputs.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.